The third meeting of the CBAS Home and Community-Based Settings Stakeholder process. This is Bobby Wunsch, and we're really looking forward to a very informative meeting today and a very important set of issues that we need a lot of really thoughtful feedback on as we put together the CBAS component of the state home and community-based settings transition plan. So we are looking forward to hearing from all of you. We have several people here in the room and many people on the telephone. So let me just start by reviewing just our usual housekeeping rules, and then we'll get right into the meeting. So everyone knows that the meeting is recorded, and the recording will be posted on the CDA website so that you can listen to it or recommend that your colleagues listen to it. There's also tons of information on the CDA website related to this issue, reference material, and previous meeting materials. If you want to send in a comment or a question, we'll be taking comments throughout the whole meeting, and then we will also have public comment at the end of the meeting. And if you want to make a comment or ask a question, just type it into the questions box on your screen's control panel, and we'll be stopping regularly throughout the meeting to get input. So don't hesitate to keep those comments and questions coming, and we'll loop back to them as we go. And periodically, we're also going to open up the phone line so we can hear your voices and have a conversation. So here's the agenda that we've got planned for today. We're just going to have a quick review of the last meeting, which was on March 17th. We're going to get an update on the California statewide transition plan and feedback that we've begun getting from CMS and how this process is going to unfold from a timeline perspective. And then we're going to spend a good part of our meeting, even though you can't tell from the agenda the way it's timed up here. There's a little bit of a mistake. But we're going to spend the bulk of our meeting looking at the transition plan and getting your input on a variety of different topics. And we're actually going to go through sections of the plan piece by piece. We've identified some questions that we'd like your input on. We want to solicit more comments and questions from each of you. So we've got a tool we're going to use for that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Right at the end of the meeting, we are going to talk about the two work groups that we talked about at the March meeting, the IPC work group and the quality work group. We've developed charters for those. We have some volunteers for those work groups. We're anxious to get more volunteers, so don't leave the meeting early because we need you to sign up for these work groups close to the end of the meeting. We'll have public comment again at the end of the meeting, and then we'll review our next steps before we adjourn the meeting. And our next meeting will be on July 19th, and that will be the date that the draft plan for CBAS will be released for the start of the 30-day comment period. I said July, and it's May 19th. Sorry. Okay, we'll come back and remind you again, but that's May 19th, our next meeting. So just as a reminder for everybody, this is the purpose of this stakeholder process. And as you all know, our goal is to develop a transition plan for bringing CBAS centers into compliance with the requirements of the Home and Community-Based Settings Rule as specified in the current 1115 waiver, the Bridge to Reform waivers, special terms and conditions. So just again, a review for everyone, the Home and Community-Based Settings Rule, 42 CFR 441.301, sets forth a set of requirements, and we want to make sure that as we are proceeding through our work today that we really keep these issues in mind, starting with the most important component, which is that based on the needs of individuals indicated in their patient-centered or person-centered plan, The rulings require, so again, the most important, the center of the conversation is the individual's needs as it's identified in their individual care plan. The HCB settings rule requires that settings are integrated in and support full access to the greater community. We'll talk a little bit about your thoughts about how this can be addressed in the plan. That settings are selected by the individual among setting options. That the setting ensures individual rights of privacy, dignity, and respect, and freedom from coercion and restraint. That settings optimize the autonomy and independence in making life choices for the individual. That the settings facilitate choice for the individual regarding services and who provides them. That the setting provides options for individuals to control their own schedules, including access to food and visitors at any time. And of course, that the settings are physically accessible. So as we go through the work plan, just keep these requirements in mind. We're going to go through each one on the tool that we've developed so that we can get your feedback. These are very, very important components to making sure that the requirements in the HCB settings rule are implemented at all the CBAS centers throughout the state. Okay, so our meeting objectives, the most important thing is that we hear from all of you and provide input on the CBAS HCB settings regulations, and that we hear from you about what should be included in the transition plan. And that's really our focus for today's meeting. So just as a reminder, I jumped ahead a little bit earlier on this. We had our first kickoff meeting in February. Our second meeting was last month. Today's our third meeting, focused on the plan development. May 19th, again, it's May 19th, is our next meeting. And that day, the draft plan will be released for CBAS, the CBAS component. And that will kick off the 30-day public comment period. CMS has requested that each comment be identified that is received by the public, and that in this case for the CBAS portion of the plan, that the state identify what they've done with the comment, how it's been incorporated, if it's not incorporated, why it hasn't been incorporated. So again, each comment that's received during the public comment period to the draft plan will be individually addressed, and that will be brought back to our meeting on July 8th, where we'll review the comments and review the revised CBAS transition plan. And then the plan is due to be submitted by the state of California, the full California statewide plan, on September 1st. Okay? So again, our next meeting is May 19th, a very important meeting. We'll review the draft plan, and then there'll be a 30-day comment period when you'll have to be studying the plan in lots of detail, and then we'll meet again on July 8th to review the revised plan after all the public input has been analyzed and incorporated as appropriate. Okay, well, let's get started then. Denise Peach from CDA has, of course, been leading up this effort along with DHCS. And Denise, would you like to review the materials from our March 17th meeting?
Sure. We can get the next slide here. Just want to, I don't want to spend a ton of time on them, but just to let you know that the meeting summary from the March 17th meeting, it was a little slow getting out this time. We've had some staff out with some late season bugs going around. But we do have the meeting summary out from the 17th meeting, and it's at that link right there. The stakeholder input log, again, we update it after each meeting and intermittently throughout when we get updates that come in between meetings. And so the stakeholder input log from all of the conversations that have gone on thus far is at that link that's posted there on the slide. And then if we could just pop out for a moment and look at the key documents on our website, I want to bring attention to something that we did this last week that's very important and we want you to see, and that is not that. It is a flyer and fact sheet that we released to our CDAS providers through an all-center letter last week, and when we get there, we'll show you what it looks like. It's a one-page flyer. We hope we've made it very understandable to beneficiaries, CDAS participants, and caregivers. We've asked our CBAS providers to assist in getting the word out about the HCB rules, about the process that's taking place here with getting input, and to help to translate this information to individuals at the center and encourage their participation. So we've asked them to post this flyer, put it on the wall of the center near in a prominent spot near the license, and then to share verbally with the participants. Again, to encourage their participation, encourage their understanding of the rules, and ask for them to provide input in this process. So at some point, after we show you all the documents we have on our desktop for today's presentation, we'll show you the flyer. So here it is. And then there's a fact sheet that goes along with this. So the main theme here, please join the conversation. We've tried to, again, make this process understandable to everyone. And we will do this again when it comes to public comment time, again, to make sure that we cast as wide a net as we can to get input from the people who this program matters the most to, and that's our participants. So that's the flyer, and then is the fact sheet, the second page there. Can we just scroll down? There's some supporting additional information. This may be a little bit less user-friendly. We hope it's still very understandable about what this is all about, including making sure that people, the participants, understand this is about them getting the services that they want and need, and that those services are quality services. So, so these are the two documents that we've sent out this last week, and we will continue to do more education and outreach to our CBAS providers and ask to partner with them in getting the word out. So I just wanted to call attention to that document. And I think that's all I wanted to share with that. And Bonnie?
Great. So the fact sheet and the flyer were sent out to all the CBAS centers.
Yes.
And asked that they inform the participants, hang the flyers up, but really talk to each participant to let them know that this process is underway and that we encourage their participation or their family members' participation. Great. So now we're going to hear from Jalal Haddad from DHCS about the California statewide transition plan. Jalal, are you on the line? Sorry? Okay, Jalal, you need to enter your PIN so that you can be logged on if you can hear me. And I think Michael is going to email him and tell him so that we can get Jalal on the phone and hear his voice. So if everybody can just hold on 1 minute. Jalal is going to talk about the status of the statewide transition plan and also the feedback that we've received so far from CMS. So let's just give Jalal another minute to sign on. Jalal, if you can hear me, we need you to enter your PIN number so that you can sign into the call officially and we can hear you review the information about the statewide plan.
Hi.
Yay! Hey Jalal, we're ready for you. So everyone, this is
Did I get here on time?
From DHCS. We can hear you just great.
Great. Yes, I'm just jumping off another call. I'd like to provide you a little bit of what's been going on our end with the statewide transition plan. We did receive a letter from CMS rejecting our plan, as was anticipated. The main area of concern was our public input process, which, by the way, CBAS is doing a fine job of it. We don't expect any issues on your end, but for the statewide plan, there was a lot of confusion around what was required as they released the new rules. They didn't release finalized guidance. There was a lot of ambiguity, and we went with the information we had, and we didn't do enough. Primarily, we missed the two forms of public input notice. What that means is, one form is through the website, through electronic means. The other form they require is a non-electronic form of communication to inform the public about how to get in touch, how to find the documents, how to request the documents. So we find that the California registry it is something that California State Library subscribes to, among others, and it's a hard copy. Is a publication that's sent out hard copy weekly, and that's how we're going to tackle public notice on an electric side going forward. So that's one of the main reasons our statewide transition plan was rejected. We're going to be correcting that in the next round, and we're looking at doing the public input process again. We have also looked at our statewide plan and compared it to the CMS checklist. And there were a few outstanding things that we didn't include in the plan, but we've been updating it and beefing it up, for lack of a better term. So we're looking pretty good. The other progress that we've made so far is we're getting ready to send out for public input the on-site assessment tool, which is the state survey team, which will consist of a variety of folks, state staff, also advocates or beneficiaries, or the makeup of the team is to be determined. That tool, we have a residential and non-residential form that the state survey teams can go out and use when they do on-site assessments. And we also are getting ready to provide for public input the provider self-assessment, which was also divided into residential and non-residential. We'll be mailing those out, emailing those out to providers statewide. And the timeline for all of this is also to be determined when we're expecting to send them out to providers and when we expect to receive them. But we have the templates ready to go, just a few more little steps to take, and then we'll be providing those out. So you all will be seeing those fairly soon. We've also reached out to an advocate network, our advocate network, and they have been very eager to get involved in helping to develop our beneficiary self-survey tool, which will be tailored to beneficiary needs, cognitive levels. They're requesting forms of the survey tool in Braille and large font and all the different ways that will be readable for beneficiaries across the board. So that's a little bit further down the road. We're working with advocates now to develop that tool. So look out for that in the coming months. The Department of Developmental Services has a couple workout groups, one of which is an education outreach group. Another is the team that's going through our state regs and policies to see how they comport with the federal rules, and they're making great progress. We're looking at in the next couple weeks seeing they're going to start tackling the language of our state regs and laws and whatnot. Right now, what they're doing is determining where to find all of the different laws and regulations that apply to the federal rules. So they're getting the outline done, and pretty soon they're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual language. So we're looking forward to that because that'll really educate us on where we're at in terms of compliance with the federal rules at this moment. So we have planned discussions with CMS. We have some questions we'd like to clarify, and we're looking forward to speaking to them so that we can get all of our outstanding questions answered, and we'll be ready to move forward. We'll be providing a new updated timeline, and how that compares to the CBAS timeline is to be determined. But look out for that too. All this will be posted to the DHCS website and also in the registrar for the public to view. So that's about it for us up to this point.
Thank you, Joel. How about if we see if anyone of the stakeholders has any questions for you on the broader statewide plan before we dig in. So Lydia is here. So if everyone who speaks could state their name and what organization they're affiliated with. We'll start here in the room. We have a few people here, and then we'll ask for people on the phone if they have any questions for Jalal. Lydia?
Hi, Jalal. Lydia from CADS, the Association for Adult Day Services. Thank you for sharing all that information. I had two quick questions. One was on beneficiary self-assessment tool. Could you just give a brief description of what's envisioned for that? And I heard you mention special formats, which are important, but I didn't hear you say language. So is the state going to also be doing the threshold language translations, or will the providers need to do that?
That's one of the questions that we have for CMS, is to what extent threshold language requirements need to be met. We know that for certain state-issued information, you do have to translate. We're not sure if this falls under that, so we will be clarifying that soon. But if so, then that's the approach we'll take.
And then could you just briefly describe what's entailed in that? And I know you're going to have a draft out in a month or so, but I don't know that we've heard that described yet.
The beneficiary tool?
Yes.
The beneficiary tool will be geared towards the folks receiving services, asking questions that get at the federal requirements. You know, in an on-site assessment tool, it'll be eyes on, you know, are there locks on the doors, and do the beneficiaries have the freedom to move about the house and have visitors when they like, and all those types of things. These questions will be geared directly towards the beneficiary. Have you had any visitors in the recently, or are you able to go outside and you know, anytime you'd like? Do you have a choice of what you eat? You know, specific, simplified questions that will serve as the third level of basically the third level of checks and balances to ensure compliance. Third being, the first is the provider tool, the on-site assessment is second, the beneficiary being third.
Jalal, could you, this is Bobby Wunsch again, before we go on to other questions, could you tell us which advocacy organizations are involved in helping create the tool?
Yes, give me a second. We have the National Health Law, the oh boy, it's an acronym I'm not familiar with. DREDF.
Disability Education and Defense Fund.
Thank you. And lastly, this isn't the final. We're still waiting on one more advocate, but we have also the Justice and Aging is very eager to help out, and I think the National Law Center is the other advocate group.
Great. Good, thank you. Let's see, Faye, did you have a comment? And just introduce yourself and the organization you're affiliated with.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And this is Faye Gordon. I'm with Justice and Aging, so great to hear all this progress that's happening. I'm just trying to understand how the on-site assessment for the residential and non-residential that DHCS will be conducting works with the CBAS transition plan. So as we contemplate CBAS's work plan and their transition plan, how would that work with the non-residential assessment that DHCS is envisioning?
We have, we've been we've been discussing with the CBAS folks how we're going to tailor. I think it's incumbent on the CBAS folks to look at what the core tool is and tailor it to the program. Since it's such a unique program and provider type, so that we that's to come, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. So it's still in development to work together. Yeah, great.
Okay, we have one question on the line, so we're going to read that question, and that's for you, Jalal. So listen up.
So this question is from Judy Canterbury. Will the beneficiary tool be used for all populations served under the HCB waiver?
Good question.
That is the plan, yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Okay, any other questions here for Jalal? Lydia?
Hi, Jalal. Lydia again. Another quick question. Has there been thought given yet as to how the on-site assessment tool process will work? Is it envisioned, for example, that there will be special teams designated over the course of time, or is it going to get folded in somehow with the licensing or certification process? Is it too soon to think about operationalizing? Can you give us
Not necessarily too soon, but I will say that we're looking at it from many possible angles. We're looking at staffing here at DHCS to handle the work that in the next coming years we'll have to be doing. The makeup of the team, we've been discussing what sorts of folks would make a robust assessment team. And in the plan we do describe when an assessment will occur. If you're presumed non-eligible, all presumed non-eligible providers will be assessed on site. Then we're looking at after receiving provider and beneficiary self-surveys, looking at triggering on-site assessments when a threshold of providers seem to be at a compliance that will trigger on-sites for that provider type. So we have thought about these things, but right now we're establishing the tools themselves, getting them out to the public so they could provide feedback, and then we'll move forward. And obviously, all of our programs do monitoring oversight. Most of our programs will see, most providers every year or other year. So we'll be folding that in also with ongoing monitoring oversight processes. So, yeah, we've been thinking about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jalal, for that update, and we'll look forward to more feedback at our next meeting in May. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to start talking about the CBAS component of the transition plan, which we are going to work on today. Denise, do you just want to say a few words about the review tool?
Sure, I do. And if we can, it's not going to blow up our presentation. I'd like to go out to that website and just show people what the tool looks like. Ah, there, successful. So what I want to share before as sort of set up to the discussion or to the work that we're going to be doing very soon is to show you what we now have in perspective that we didn't have when we first started this process back in February. This document that CMS produced, that is their basic element review tool, that essentially is going to be what the people at CMS who look at our plan are going to be using to walk down a list of standards and checklist of items to see if our plan includes these items. So, it's given us a lot of help, I think, now in sort of flagging what kinds of things should be addressed in each section, what CMS will be looking for specifically. So if we just sort of scroll through this, the first section here talks about public notice and is asking very specific questions. Jalal just talked about the public notice requirements that weren't met in the statewide plan. They're very explicit in this document about what they'll be looking for in the way of public notice. And then if we just kind of scroll through it, you'll continue to see sort of different sections, again, that we're going to be addressing today. Actually, if you scroll down to page 7, Ryan, I think that will help us. I think that's where where we get into the discussion about right there at the bottom, the systemic assessment process, talking about the plan and the assessment of statutes, regulations, policies, other places where policy exists for our programs, and what kind of review does the state do of our programs for meeting the HCB standards, some really specific things about how do we meet it, if we only meet it partially, if we meet it fully, if there are actual conflicts in the law or regulations, or if there's silence in the law or regulations. So there's a lot of things that they're going to be looking for that they're telling us in this tool. So they've been signaling a lot of things to us lately about what it is that they want us to do here. So this is just, we don't need to go through this in detail, and in fact, many of the things that are in this document, we've been working hard to sort of pull out and put into our template for our CBAS plan, and we're going to be going over those sections today. But just so you know, we do have a lot more now of an understanding of what CMS is going to be looking for in our plan. So it's helpful. Lots of things that they're going to be looking for, but helpful to know what these things are. So that's what I wanted to show you there. You can go out at your leisure. This is a link that's on our CDA website, and you can look at that tool, and it'll show you again in detail, depending on how interested you are, drilling down what the CMS reviewers are going to be looking for in our plan.
Okay, and this is the link to the CMS review tool. If anyone's interested in combing through that and understanding the level of detail that CMS will be assessing the plan on. So we're going to start now using a tool that DHCS and CDA have put together for comparing what is required in the CMS ruling and how the CBAS component of the transition plan can address each of the different rules. And just as a reminder, the assessment of the CBAS laws and regulations and policies is really what we have to think about and look at. And so the transition plan needs to address the assessment of the laws, the regulations, and policies. The assessment needs to be completed within 6 months of the plan submission. And the assessment has to include how CBAS meets, partially meets, or does not meet each home community-based standard. And then there has to be an identification of a plan for remediation of any of the standards not met. So there's a lot of detail that's going to have to be provided as part of the plan development. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. We always have something fun planned for the group. We're going to spend probably the next hour and a half, almost hour and 3/4, reviewing the outline for the CBAS transition plan, the component of the plan that will directly address CBAS. We're going to discuss items that have been identified based on the CMS guidance that have to be included. We're going to brainstorm both answers to a set of key questions that we've developed and any additional questions or items that you think need to be highlighted in each of these sections. And as we go through each section, Denise Peach is going to be typing on the screen so that you can see all of your comments in live time so that once we're done, we have a complete document with all of your input in it. And we've got several other people here in the room taking notes, so if you don't see your exact wording, we've got other people taking that down directly. So we're going to go to the tool now so that you can see, and we're going to walk through it very slowly so that we can have everybody's feedback. So this tool is located on the CDA website for the CBAS stakeholder group. If you want to look at it in a different way other than looking at it here on the screen with us, but we're basically going to go through each page now, and we're going to talk about it. So you can see how this is set up. This is not the written response. This is our tool that we've created where side by side On the left-hand side of the page, you see the general requirement lifted right out of the home and community-based setting rules that the California statewide transition plan has to respond to. And then on the right side, you see what are CBAS issues, and soon you'll see questions, and soon you'll see your feedback on the screen that we're going to go through. So the first section that goes from page, on the tool that we're working with, that goes from page 1 through 6, is really the background on the plan. And this talks about the background for the transition plan and how these home and community-based services are organized in California. What we're suggesting is that in this background section, in the CBAS section, that we will talk about the CBAS waiver amendments to the special terms and conditions that are part of the current 1115 waiver, the Bridge to Reform waiver. I'll keep emphasizing that because we're already working on statewide through DHCS the new Medi-Cal 2020 waiver, which is the waiver proposal that's been submitted to CMS that we hope will begin on November 1st of 2015. But this all relates to the waiver that's currently in effect, the Bridge to Reform waiver. So we want to include background on the CBAS waiver amendment revisions in the special terms and conditions of the Bridge to Reform waiver, and how CMS has incorporated the home community-based settings requirements and the CBAS stakeholder process into the special terms and conditions, and the requirements that the transition plan for CBAS be integrated into the statewide, the California statewide plan. So that's the kind of background information that we think would be most appropriate in this background section. And I just want to see if anybody has anything else they might suggest go into the background section. And if it doesn't belong, we'll find a place for it. So I know no one's had a chance to read all this detail in advance. Anybody have any other ideas of what
Yeah,
you're
I would just say
about?
that in the introduction section, when we come down a little bit further, I think that there are a lot of things that are really overview material about the CBAS benefit and some specifics about population survey, all of those things about CBAS that we've put, we think belong in the introduction. So we kind of kept it light here, thinking that really the only explanation that's needed is we're doing this because the amendment to the waiver says that we now need to conform to the HCBS rules. So we're going to give a little bit of background and then go straight into what CBAS is all about.
Good.
So you'll see that as we scroll down.
Okay, well, why don't we just scroll through to page 7, which is where the introduction section that Denise just referred to begins. And we've got some, not only ideas of what should go in the introduction section, but we have some questions that we need some feedback on from all of you, some specific questions. So if everyone if anyone is looking at this in their in print, we're now going to page 7, which is the introduction section. And again, you see on the left the requirements for the introduction section that will be in the statewide plan. And here's what we think should be in the introduction section from the CBAS perspective, which will be, again, a detailed description of this CBAS, home and community-based setting stakeholder process, the kind of meetings that were held, what were covered during the meetings, the opportunities and the comments received in public comment, and the comments received in general, and that's why the stakeholder input log is so important. The section will also include, we believe, an overview of the CBAS program, the history, the transition from the Adult Day Health Center program, the milestones during the years of ADHC, the elimination of the ADHC benefit, the recreation of the CBAS program, the model and the services provided, the eligibility criteria, the population served, and a lot of current data about the performance of the CBAS centers, the number, their location, the geography, and the the inclusion of the CBAS benefit as part of the managed care program, which was a big change, as everyone knows, in the program, and really should be addressed as part of the overview of the current program. So we've identified several questions here that we'd like to get your feedback on, including hearing from you about these 4 questions. So maybe we can raise the 4 questions up so everybody can see all 4 questions, if that's possible at once. I guess that's not possible. So let me just read the questions, and then we'll go back through them one by one. And we have 2 goals here. The 2 goals are, let's get some quick brainstorming feedback on how to answer the questions. And then secondly, are there other items that we haven't thought about that should be addressed in the introduction section? Again, for anyone who's just joined us, and we have almost 100 people participating today, either here at CDA or on the telephone through the webinar. If anyone's just joining us, what we're doing now is we're actually creating the outline, the contents of the outline for the CBAS component of the statewide home and community-based settings rules transition plan. So the 4 questions at hand: how is the CBAS setting like other home and community-based settings, and how is it unique? Question 2, how well does the CBAS model meet the home and community-based settings requirements and or the spirit or intent of the requirements? Question 3, how might CBAS centers improve compliance with the home and community-based settings requirements and advance the spirit of the rule? How could CBAS help better support access and integration in the community, informed choices, rights of privacy and freedom from coercion, and the autonomy and independence in daily activities in the physical environment? And question 4, what could be done to facilitate improvement identified in question 2 above? And for those of you that need a reminder, question 2 is, how well does the CBAS model meet the HCB settings requirements and the spirit or intent of the requirements? So we'll come back to that. So let's just start with question 1, and we're going to work our way through this, and we'll first take feedback, ideas from the folks here in the room, and then we'll, if you are on the phone and want to make a comment, if you can just signal by either writing in your comment or raising your electronic hand, and we'll open the phone and call on you. So we can have you, folks that are on the webinar, comment in either of 2 ways. You can write your comment in, or you can raise your electronic hand, and we'll open the phone for you. So let's get started with question number 1. How is the ADHC CBAS setting like other HCB settings, and how is it unique? So anyone here in the room want to add something? Lydia from CATS.
Well, one thing that I've thought a lot about is the fact that CBAS is a program that has to be provided within a health facility licensed site. So unlike some other what we call HCBS settings, this is governed by and operates with health facility licensure.
Great.
Which gives us its own set of rules and challenges.
Yeah, very, very good place to start. And so as everybody can see, Denise has typed that in, and this is how the rest of the meeting is going to go until we come to the end. So I'll just keep moving us through this and asking for feedback. But if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Or if someone has something and they're not sure where it belongs, just say it, and we'll find a place. We'll find a place to put it. Again, we're looking for both answers to the questions, and we're looking for additional items that we might not have thought of. So anybody else have any other feedback to question number 1? Faye.
I think when we're looking at different states that have applied or have been working through their transition plan process, one thing that I think makes CBAS unique compared to a lot of other adult day programs is that it was really created with the intent to key people from nursing homes to promote community integration, that there's this very clear language that the purpose is strong community integration. And so I think clarifying the sort of historic intent from when the way CBAS was created within the transition plan will distinguish it from other types of programs.
Yeah, really, really important point. Thank you. Celine, do you have something you want to add? So, Celine, you haven't introduced yourself yet, so make sure everybody knows on the phone who you are.
This is Celine with Napa Valley Hospice and Adult Day Services. What came to my mind is just that as we evolved, there's a local feel of how we developed our CBAS centers that needs a very local, unique community need, which makes it challenging against the HCBS rules based on populations we serve.
Good. Very good addition. Great. And we have some people wanting to, have they made comments or wanting to make comments?
We have 3 individuals who made comments. So we have a comment from Daisy Absalon. CBAS provides services similar to SNF services, except a bed to sleep on.
Good. Thank you, Daisy.
And then from Lois Sones, CBAS supports individuals living at home in their own community.
Great.
And then last one from Mallory Vega. It is a one-stop shop that provides a multidisciplinary approach to care.
Great. Thanks, Mallory. So now everybody gets the idea of what we're trying to do here. Great comments on the phone, and as you can see, great comments from the group here in the room, and all now covered in the notes. It seems to me, I wonder if we want to say anything here. This is just a question to the group about the role of CBAS in managed care as a managed care benefit. Is this the place to put it, or is there a better place to put it? Lydia.
Denise knows these much better than I do. It seems like here, and my other thought was that we should probably comment on that here, but also when Kipe, you said compared to other states, I also know from my national experience that California is among a minority of states where, as Mallory said, there's a full interdisciplinary team working that includes therapy services. In other states, those are not required services. So to summarize, I think in our state, along with a handful of others, we really are that comprehensive, like Mallory said, one-stop shop. So I just wanted to highlight the therapy services there because that does set us aside from most other states.
So maybe it would make sense in this section to list the array of services
I think so.
As part of the introduction information.
Right.
What do you think?
I do, and also to your point about managed care, and then Amanda's going to pipe in. Again, compared to other states, California is in a minority in having this particular program fully integrated into managed care statewide. And in fact, we may even be uniquely in that position, Faye, where we are 100% integrated into managed care. So I think we really do need to emphasize that because that, as Faye and I talked the other day, this brings its own set of additional layers of rules and regs that the centers have to comply with. So there's a lot of masters relative to this program.
Amanda, this is Amanda from Total ADHD Solutions, and I was just, there was a lot in the HCBS about choice, and we have the participants have choice of centers. We have such a multitude of staff. They have the choice of staff to take care of them with our ratio of caregivers to participants in the centers. The staffing ratios are pretty high. So I think that we really give participants the choice to where they want to go and who they want to have take care of them.
Terrific. Great point. Yes, and we have one more from the phone.
We have one more comment from Diane Puckett. CBAS is not necessarily a 5-day or 7-day-a-week program. It can be tailored to maximize independence. Additionally, we provide ongoing rehabilitation, but often to people who have retired from their working lives.
Diane, thank you. That's a great point in terms of, again, tailoring the program to meet the individual's needs for independence. I think goes back to Amanda's point about choice. So that's great.
And I think the other important thing Diane said there was life stages.
Mm-hmm.
Life stages,
Good.
so be cognizant of that.
Good. Thanks for adding that, Lydia. Okay, well, let's go on to the second question. And again, if I'm moving too fast, someone just tell me and I'll slow down.
Not for anybody but the person tired.
As I mentioned earlier, there are several people taking notes to help the 5 minutes.
Cute and strange on the screen.
You know, it's hard to write on the board for those of you that have done this before. It's also hard to type all the comments as they come. But this is a great way to build this outline. So question 2 is, how well does the ADHC CBAS model meet the HCB settings requirements and this is very important, and/or the spirit or intent of the requirements?
And can I just add that I put there in parentheses the reference the 30 questions work tool. Not that we were going to be doing that today, but to remind everybody that during the first meeting we went through a long exercise of going through the CMS exploratory questions. And at that time we came up, as I've said, I think that there was still a lot of head scratching at the time because we didn't have as much direction from CMS. But we came up with some feedback initially about where we thought we were with all of those particular areas that CMS asked us to look into. So that's a note to myself as much as anybody else, just to remind us that we did that.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. And a reminder to everyone that all of the previous feedback from our previous 2 meetings will be incorporated as appropriate into this work. So any feedback from folks here in the room about how well does the model, the CBAS model, respond to the home and community-based settings requirements and probably as or more important, the spirit and intent of the requirements? Lydia?
You know, this is a tough one because I would say that structurally and how the rules and regulations were written with Daisy's comment in mind about about alternative to institutional care, and yet providing similar array of services. I think the regulatory structure really is very supportive of the HCBS regs as I understand them. But I don't know how the state, until they do the survey, the self-assessment or the on-site survey, can really answer the question of how well does the implementation fully meet the HCBS intent or spirit. So I think if I were in Denise's shoes, I'd probably frame it somewhat like that, because we can't know, and Amanda goes to a lot of centers through her consulting work, so I know you've seen a lot of variety of centers in your career, more than I have, and there's probably a bell curve out there, right? So that one I struggle with a little bit because I do strongly feel the regulatory structure and spirit is very supportive, especially as we move more into person-centered care implementation that we're teaching very heavily on right now. But that would be my comment, Bobby.
Mm-hmm. That's an important perspective. Anyone else, Elaine?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, I don't know the ins and outs of the regulations yet. I mean, I think we're stronger on the spirit and intent side of, person-centered care and promoting independence and staying in the community and keeping out of, institutional care. And that's what the strength of the model is.
Yeah. I agree so much. That's first when the rule came out, reading it, it was so confusing because it was very confusing because it was like we already do this or it doesn't apply to us. I'm not sure if this is quite answering the question, but it's like make sure your participants, or how are you integrating your participants into the community? They live at home. It was kind of trying to put a round peg into a square hole that they designed for us that we're trying to shift. I mean, that's how our model, I think, is so unique and so in the spirit of what they're asking for already. That, they're asking us to change what may not even need to be changed as much. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd like to see person-centered care be a little bit, more heavily referenced in our regs, but or however we want to go about it. But I think the spirit of what we're doing is so heavily meets what they're asking for, or doesn't apply.
So I guess my second statement to that about the regulation side is a concern of my original comment of how we specialize as programs, and then if there's somebody that's not a match for our program that we feel in terms of our scope of care or a way that we developed into a specialty center, then we may not be meeting the spirit of regulations or the actual regulations if there's somebody that we don't think is that we can safely care for in our facility.
Any other comments? We have some comments from folks on the webinar.
Another comment from Diane Puckett. I believe that this model meets the spirit and intent beautifully when provided as it is intended to be provided in a person-centered manner. And then she has a follow-up comment. We'll integrate participants into the community by ensuring that they're able to take part in things outside of ADHD for their needs by bringing in volunteers, sharing the news of the world and community. These are ways this comes to life in our programs. And then another comment from Daisy Absalon. CBAS writes a plan of care tailored for the participant's need and goal for attending the program. And then on a somewhat different note from Fonda Howington, I believe that because we are a facility-based center, some of the HCB regulations may be a challenge for the day-to-day procedure by the staff.
Well, thank you, Diane, Daisy, and Fonda for those comments. So I think what we're hearing is kind of the yin and the yang of how CBAS and the model responds to the regulations. With a strong feeling that certainly CBAS promotes independence and integration in the community because the participants are living in the community, but some concerns about how and which of the regulations may or may not apply to the program. And I think when we go on to the next question, which has a similar question but has the 4 components, access and integration in the community, informed choice of services and setting, rights of privacy and freedom from coercion and restraint, autonomy and independence in daily activities and physical environment. There probably are other things we might say, particularly about B and C and D, the ways in which CBAS centers improve compliance with the requirements of the rule and advance the spirit of the law in terms of how the centers really respond to these 4 approaches. Lydia, Lydia, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, I just wanted to again mention that for formatting's sake, I shrunk some of these requirements down. Yeah. So clearly, again, going back to the 30 questions, we know that there's a lot deeper levels that CMS rules, that the HCB rules actually go to in the language of the law, and that CMS has asked us to explore in each of these things. So we just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that.
Thank you. High level, yeah. Thank you, Denise. Yeah, exactly. So again, everyone who's participating can look both at the CMS 30 questions, which we reviewed at the first meeting, but probably also, as importantly, the new tool that we looked at that CMS will be reviewing the plan on. So anything, Lydia, I think you wanted to add something on 3, and 3 and 2 really go together.
Yeah, these are good because they're a little more detailed. We get down a little more. So the first thing that jumped to my mind just looking at B was informed choice of services and settings. I know how that's supposed to work, for example, in the 19C waivers, but the way I'm kind of picturing that now in a CMS kind of framework would be that this is a voluntary program and participants choose a program from among other things that they've explored in the community. They sign a participation agreement, so it's very clear they're choosing to be in the program. So that's one way that people come to receive this service. And then the second way now in our managed care environment that we talked about is that managed care plans through their care coordinator or maybe a team they've put together under the 1115 waiver are discussing choices in the community with their members and then offering CBAS as an option that, again, the person can choose from an array. So while we haven't seen that fully implemented, realized is a good word, Bobby, or the word maven, that is certainly the intent. So I would say that if that is what CMS is looking for there, that we would emphasize the voluntary nature of the program and then the managed care role in laying out an array of services.
Great. Really, really important points. Any other points under question 3 that haven't been mentioned yet? Because we don't need to repeat too much, even though there's a lot of repetitive in the questions. Yeah, Faye, please.
And this might not be the right spot for
That's
it.
okay.
So stop me if
That's
it's not
okay.
correct. But I'm wondering if there's opportunity as we sort of go through the rule and go through the existing regulations and existing requirements to see if there's ways to provide more flexibility to the centers to allow for greater autonomy and allow for greater independence. And if this is an opportunity to sort of reflect on, are there things that are sort of restricting some of that may not be working as well in reality to promote some of the independence and integration.
That's a great point, and I think an important time to highlight that issue with the hope that at some point soon the statute will also be looked at within this framework. So I think that this is a great place to add that. Anything else, Amanda or Celine here in the room? And we have some comments from participants on the webinar.
We actually have a question from Michael Chai. Can the families or caretakers, or will the families and caretakers be able to understand the complexity of these changes, let alone the participants themselves?
That's a great question, Mike. Great question. I think, to a great degree, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the role of the center staff, and center leadership really is to translate these rules and changes to the families and the participants. And that's one important function that they do provide. Denise?
Yeah, as you say, a couple of suggestions. For Michael, obviously we're all evolving in our understanding of this and our skills around it. I think this is an opportunity for us to do more training for our CBAS providers and provide them with some insights. I know there's a lot of insights in this room, and we need to start collecting some of those. We're going to talk about partnering opportunities, I think, in one of the questions I threw out here. So training for sure. And then also, as we were challenged to write that flyer in the last couple of weeks and get it into a format that was understandable, we shot it out to Lydia and some providers, to our DHCS colleagues. We had a lot of people weigh in, and we kept getting it honed down more and more to what comes down to some pretty simple messages about how are your services working for you? How is this is about you getting the services you want and need that are quality and meeting your needs. So I think that while for those of us who are intimate with this plan, we're going to be getting into a lot of deep and bureaucratic language for the participants, it comes down to some pretty simple stuff like rubber meets the road with their services. So Amanda and I were talking before we got started today, and she was talking about some inspiring things she was reading about how centers can do interviewing with participants, motivational interviewing, is that what you were talking about? And fantastic to activate the participants in their own care. And so I think that we're all going to be learning a lot of fantastic new tricks. And I look forward to being down at the CADS conference in Berkeley next week to hear from some of the experts on some of these subjects about their insights. But we've got a lot of training to do. I think that's one of our definite opportunities here.
Great. Thanks for adding that. Yes, more comments.
And then one more comment from Diane Puckett, who's commenting on what they had to say. The regulations are designed for this purpose, so I agree with the latest speaker. We need to look even for the ways in which oversight impacts the individual.
Good. Thank you, Diane. Okay, well, question number 4, just as we move on to the next section, really is a question about how can improvements be achieved
And that was supposed to be number 3, I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. And I think Denise already started answering this question in terms of the question that Michael triggered, which is related to training, new skills, a different kind of communication with the participants and the family members. And Ed Long would like to comment from
I
CDA.
just have a question for Diane Cooper-Puckett. When you say the regs are designed for this purpose, and what purpose do you need? To offer flexibility or to restrict independence?
I think she was referring to Faye's comment about flexibility, but Diane, feel free to comment if you heard Ed's question.
Can I make a quick comment
Sure.
while Diane is composing her thoughts? Because Diane and I often have like this mind meld going on. We work together so closely. It's kind of scary. Hi, Diane. So, we've lost. There is definite regulation about flexibility, program flexibility, and we have eroded that collectively over the years. So if there's a way that we can somehow get back to that so that services can be more customized, and we, now the providers have to ask permission from public health. We're the bottom of the list in terms of priorities with them. It's a long story we won't go into today. But if we can get back to that concept, gosh, I think we could do so much more. So it's, a little bit of bureaucracy, but it's got a value to it.
So again, this is the balance between being a licensed health facility with lots of rules and regulations and being responsive to an individual's needs, which is the person-centered approach. And that's really, really hard to do. And everything that's done, you have to scratch your head and ask that question. So I think these are really, really good points.
So Diane responded.
Good.
So she said to ensure dignity and independence.
Yeah.
And because flexibility was designed into the regs to meet the needs of individual communities.
Good. Thank you, Diane, and thanks, Ed, for that clarification.
I almost forgot about flexibility.
Yeah, it's been so long. Okay, we're going to move on to page 10.
Well, we didn't get number 4 yet. Number 4. What can be done to facilitate the improvement identified above?
Yeah, I thought we covered that under training.
Okay, training.
Different kinds of communication with participants and family members.
Sorry.
Amanda's going to add some
Motivational.
new skills. Training, new skills.
What else? We want to train the staff, but I think it'd also be great if we could have trainings for the family members.
Yep.
Because if we do start implementing, some of the person-centered care, some of the real things that we want to change, we also want to train the families and the participants as well for what this means and how they're going to be collaborating with us and that kind of work. So I think it's training for everyone involved.
And I would add, it may not be trained under the rubric of training, but I think it would also be for the managed care plans who you're now so integrated with, their staff, have to really understand how the centers and how the model can contribute to the goals of the managed care plan as well. Other referring agencies who work with the family and the participants on a whole array of other issues as well. So those linkages to all the other resources, we need to understand the role that a CVAS center can
We also talked about CVAS being more integrated into the plan itself in terms of being part of their teams, which would also lead to more person-centered care assessments and recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. And Celine, next time you have to speak up because I'm afraid people, we have this microphone around. We want to make sure people understand. Do you think that covered it? Lydia, do you want to add something?
Can I throw out one idea? And through our community-based health home model and our very close work with Partnership Health Plan has been great. We discovered you reminded me of this, Amanda, the PAM tool, patient activation measure, and some of the plans do use it. It is a valid, reliable tool developed by the University of Washington, but it costs money, to use. It's a licensed product. But my fantasy is, because we've tested it and it's really been a fantastic tool, is if somehow we can spread the use of that tool to help us meet these goals of independent self-activation and so on. So that would be one, like what can be done to facilitate the solution I would have. Good. And the state would pay for it, and get the license down to all the providers, and we'll have a lovely learning community around town. Okay?
I'm sure the state will suggest that the plans pay for it.
Someone besides the providers, is my point.
Okay. You think that covers it, Denise?
Yeah, that's great.
Good. Okay,
You
now
guys are really helping me with the work that we're going to be having to do here.
Yeah, we're trying to help you.
it's really good. Okay, we're going to go on to page 10. And page 10 and 11 really cover the phases of implementation, starting with the first phase, which is education and outreach. And if you look again,
I don't know why it's doing that.
if you look again on the left side of the page, this is an excerpt from what the CMS requirement is for the statewide plan. And then on the right side, we tried to outline what we think should be covered in the CMS section of the plan.
Can I just clarify quickly, because the left side is actually what's currently in the statewide plan.
Okay,
so,
great.
So there may be some additional things, and we tried to identify where the CMS will be reviewing the plan for the fall.
Good, good. And this, again, focuses on the CMS. So this section we're suggesting would include, again, the description of the stakeholder process, the website and how all the materials have been posted, the participant and provider flyer and fact sheet that was just used for the first time and will be used throughout the rest of the process, outreach methods, the provider and beneficiary tools, and how the tools were used to educate people about the HCB rules. So we have, again, a number of questions that we want to get your feedback on. We've got 3 questions, and I'll just read them first. Let's see. No. I'll just read them and then we'll go back over them. So question 1 in this section on education and outreach, what more can be done to engage participants and caregivers in the development of and comments on the CBAS transition plan? Question 2, what additional resources and or training are needed to assist participants, caregivers, providers, and health plans to understand the home and community-based settings requirements? And 3, what partnership opportunities might exist for developing resources and or training? So we kind of started down this path already, which is, the more we get into this, I think the more that will be clear. But let's start with this question of what more can be done to engage participants and caregivers in the development of and the comments on the CBAS, which is the part we're concerned with, the CBAS part of the HCB settings transition plan. So again, we've started with this meeting with a flyer and a fact sheet in very low literacy language so that it could be accessed by a number of different people to start educating people. What other ideas do people have in addition to these meetings and the flyer and the fact sheet? Any other thoughts about how we could more actively engage participants and caregivers in this process? This is hard.
Well, I think,
Elaine?
I mean, at the center level, you can have meetings and inform the participants. I think that our access to caregivers, because when you give them something written and you really need that face-to-face, high-touch communication with them, that this goes to a whole bigger thing. That if our bundle includes us being able to do more home visits, where we can have more caregiver access versus just over the phone, we would be a lot more effective in being able to, educate our caregivers about these conflicts when they're already so stressed already.
Yeah. So talking to the participants can certainly be done by the center staff, and that's very important. Access to the caregivers and the family is a little harder, and that's one that just sending home the flyer may or may
even
not.
inviting them to meetings, you try all
They're
these
pretty
things,
busy.
but it's just one more thing they have to do. So,
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Amanda, do you want to add something?
Kind of, it might be the rainbow and unicorn idea, the rainbow and unicorns, but having, if we've got a stakeholder meeting, to actually have that up on this at the center and run it at the center, during the meet, have them project it and have it, for them. Have the stakeholder meeting, just like people are listening at home right now or in their offices. Invite the staff and the participants and their families to come and listen to it too, and be involved in it and ask the questions and stuff.
So I think what you're saying is that while this meeting is going on, to invite the family members, the participants, and the staff of the centers to be sitting around the screen, the computer, and participating in this meeting as a group, as an educational tool. Great. And it may be, I was thinking as you were saying it, also to think about how you could have a webinar, maybe even in the evening, for the family members once they've taken care of their families, to talk about these issues. So again, they can stay home and listen to the conversation and participate and ask questions. Maybe a 30-minute webinar instead of a 3-hour webinar like we're having. So I think both of those are great points in terms of activating people's engagement and learning in the process. Faye, did you want to add something?
Yeah, this is also sort of just a random thought, because I know everyone's time is so sensitive. I'm wondering if, as the process develops and there's more concrete ideas about potential changes or anything that could actually change at the program level, if it would make sense to have some sort of staff feedback process before that happens, to have meetings just with the staff of different centers to see how the different teams would feel about
Different changes. Yeah, great idea. Great idea to involve the staff at a deeper level. Yeah, really good. Lydia?
I don't know if this would meet this goal, or if it fits more with what Jalal described as the beneficiary feedback, but it just struck me that just like, you kind of distilled some questions down to like 3 or 4 questions. I mean, is there a set of questions that all the centers could take to a group meeting at the center and have a discussion and then record the participants' responses rather than trying to overwhelm them with this whole, oh, there's a transition plan and it's going to be, I mean, they're just going to tune out and say, get me my lunch, So
that's actually a great idea. I mean, this is a great combination of ideas.
Are there just some basic questions that would be so useful for you guys and for us to have that would be around independence, autonomy, choice, visitors? Do some participants feel like they're kind of isolated in their center because they never see kids or volunteers or anyone? I don't know. Maybe they like it that way, maybe they don't. So let's ask them.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing to do, like to say, like on Tuesday afternoon, every center will have a 30-minute or 45-minute meeting. Here's the same 3 questions. Everybody should ask them, get feedback,
Record the questions.
record them, and send the answers in. That would be awesome. That's a great idea.
And we could do the same thing for caregivers come into the
Right.
center or to a caregiver support group
Yeah.
and have the same set of questions developed so that we had a stakeholder cohort.
Right.
Or you could send them home with that piece of paper with the 3 questions listed, and they might be able to, and could bring it back. Some will bring it back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a lot of different approaches to the same.
And the participants too.
So we could do it in advance of the big, self-assess or whatever they called it now, like the beneficiary assessment, to at least feed into this process. And then knowing that bigger one's going to come, who knows when that'll happen. But
That's a great idea.
I'd love to
That would be
hear
fun.
from people.
That would be a really meaningful and fun way to get lots more. And you could do the same thing with the staff, as Celine said, sort of at every level of the program.
Some
A
great
similar set
ideas
of
might
questions.
come out.
Yeah, exactly. Denise wants to
Yeah,
add
one
to
thing
this.
is it triggers me. So
Yeah.
these sections in the plan kind of all, bleed into one another. And I think it's our thought so far, we're going to get to that section soon, that part of the ongoing monitoring and compliance that we'll be doing, that we already do for certification, that we'll roll some of this up into our existing processes. And so part of what we envision is that we will have, right now we interview participants when we go on site to do certification reviews, that part of what we'll do is to give them some opportunity to give us information either in writing ahead of time or during our interview about these HCB issues. So, so I guess the point just being that the education and outreach that we're doing now is to some degree to inform people about the rule and to get their participation in the process and in the plan, but that it's going to be ongoing, that these rules are here, and that part of what we're going to be doing is over time bringing everybody's understanding level up and the engagement level up, in how they get better and better care at the centers and through the plans. So I guess just that point that it's an ongoing effort, and so the education and outreach goes way beyond just us getting the right public notices out and meeting CMS's sort of threshold issues from the plan.
Good, thank you. So we have a few comments from people on the webinar, and then we're going to go on to question number 2.
Okay, so we have similar suggestions from Daisy Absalon. So caregivers may respond more to a questionnaire sent to them rather than sending them letters for comment. Another suggestion, how about a short video presentation uploaded on YouTube so that families can watch at their convenience?
Love it.
Good idea.
Great idea.
This is from Justin 1. Another suggestion from Louis Soames. Small groups of participants at the centers would probably enjoy discussing a set of questions distilled down as was suggested. And love the idea of involving staff and providing their ideas and input.
All right.
We have a few more.
Good.
So though webinars may work well for us, I doubt they would be very effective for our non-English speaking participants and families.
Good point.
A more high-touch process with people they already know would be needed, I think. And another comment from Elizabeth Machado, need to ensure that meetings are in participant caregiver first language.
Yeah, really good. Those 2 points are very important to be reminded of. I think this all points to, including the YouTube video, approaching this from a variety of different methods,
Learning methods.
And definitely different languages.
And then just one more question.
Yeah, great.
From Michael Chai. Since transitioning to CVAS from ADHC, many of those in the community, particularly traditional referral sources like hospitals, discharge units, SNFs, ICF, are unaware of these changes. How will these service providers, as well as the community as a whole, be made aware of these changes?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Michael, let us think about that as we go through this, and maybe we can come back to that at the end. Thank you.
That's kind of what I was thinking about. There needs to be some type of consumer campaign in relationship to these services and supports, and how the different consumers of this, whether you're a referral source or at a community level, that you know that you have this choice.
No.
That's true. That's an even bigger, yeah.
If we have any plans on the line, that would be a great thing to hear them, if anybody there is talking about these kinds of things, because that's definitely where the plan has a role.
Yeah, the plan does have a role in certainly distributing that information.
Yeah, please. So another question or suggestion from Diane Puckett. How about taking a positive focus and model best practices by asking for stories of how these values are being demonstrated in programs today? For example, stories of what's going well.
That's great, Diane. Great suggestion. So apropos of Denise's question or comment about how the plans are involved in promoting and educating other providers in the plans network about CVAS. I wonder, are there any, I can't see the list of who's participating, if there's any managed care plans participating today, and I'm sure there are, If you want to comment at all, we can either open the phone line for you, or you could write in your answer to the question of how do you educate your staff and all of the members of your provider network about the CBAS benefit and the value of the CBAS model. I'll just stop for a minute and we'll give them a chance to either raise their electronic hand or write in their comments before we move on to question 2. Okay, well, we'll keep coming back to the plan issue. Denise, thanks for bringing it up. And it'll actually come up here in question 2. And we can also reach out to some of the plans and ask for their input on this issue. Question 2 is, what additional resources, and we've already really had this conversation, what additional resources and or training are needed to assist participants, caregivers, providers, and plans to understand the new requirements? And really a lot of what we were talking about certainly was about participants, family members, providers, staff, and the plans. Anything else anybody wants to add that we haven't covered in this under question 2 that we haven't covered yet? It seems like this
More can be done to engage. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, more additional resources are needed.
Yeah, we haven't crossed over it.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I do think this really is a role, since managed care is statewide and CBAS is part of managed care now. I mean, and the plans don't have as much contact with the family members, but they certainly have contact with the providers and the other community resources, that the plans really are one important point of education and training for the community of providers, and certainly for beneficiaries, about the services, as has been mentioned. And this might be an important, and they certainly have the resources to do this kind of education and training. This might be a really important place to call out the role of the plans. And maybe we could even ask some of the plans what they've offline, since we haven't heard from them, what they're doing to first educate their own staff, and secondly their provider networks, particularly the primary care and specialty providers, about the role of CBAS and the services provided.
Also seems like at the provider advisory group level in the health plan and the consumer advisory group level at the health plan, there could be a real avenue there to educate them at that level and then see how the plan is actually operationalizing that.
That's great, Celine. So all the plans have provider advisory groups and consumer advisory groups, certainly the public plans, and I think most of the commercial plans also. So that would be another avenue of getting the word out. Good. Anything else in terms of number 2? Oh, good. We have some more comments from other folks on the phone. Terrific.
We have a comment from Sheila Hembury, who says, we need money for staff to implement these great ideas.
There's a small Alzheimer's center.
Yeah. And then a comment from Lois. At Elder Day, we have met with our plan and requested that they educate their providers, especially discharge planners and physician groups.
Great.
And then also from her, statewide education about CBAS services and benefits is very important. It certainly isn't a well-known service. And then we have a response from Deb Toast from Anthem Blue Cross. We regularly in-service all departments on the basics of CBAS and have developed a referral process.
Great. Deb, thank you for, Deb is from Anthem and the Managed Care Plan, active all over the state. Thank you for chiming in there. I want to go back to Lois for a second and just see, Lois, when you've asked your Managed Care Plan to engage with the staff at the plan and the provider network, do you know if they've done that, and have you been invited to participate in those activities? While we're waiting for Lois to respond, hopefully she will, let's look at question number 3, because I think we've also touched on question number 3 already, and I want to keep us moving. But question number 3 was what partnering opportunities might exist for developing resources and or training. And I think we've talked about the managed care plans. I think the education and the resources that they have to do this and to partner with the centers is certainly helpful. Anybody have any other ideas about partnering opportunities? Lydia?
You know, Bobby, we're getting ready for our spring conference, and I noticed that we have, and this is our smaller meeting up north, I noticed we have 11 plans represented and 17 personnel from those plans.
Right.
And many of them are seeking out some of the courses that we're offering. For example, the person-centered care course is a very popular one. I'm noticing a number of plan staff attending that. So that, I feel really terrific about that because it's an opportunity, and I got me thinking as you raised that question. Maybe there are more opportunities to do some joint workshops and conferencing where plan staff have a common interest, especially the clinical staff, with the staff at the centers, and to really, I mean, we can do that as CADs as part of our job, but maybe there's a larger, way to do that or a better way to do that. So thanks for asking that question because it just triggered that thought in my mind. There's a lot of common interest and need for training.
And so it might be good if you haven't connected with the California Association of Health Plans to think about at their conference in Palm Springs every year in
Actually,
November.
Selena and I have gone to their conferences and presented. So
yeah, to have
really
some kind
nice
of track around health and community-based services.
a track.
A track for them on broader than just CVAS on the whole issue.
Yeah.
And I think that they'd probably be very open to that.
And the local initiatives.
Planning and
Yeah.
team. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, the nice thing about the California Association of Health Plans is both the commercial plans and the public plans are there. At the local health plans of California, which is LHPC, it's just the public plans, the local initiatives and the county organized health systems. They have a conference too, but I think the CAP conference attracts all of them and a broad array of people. Amanda. Go ahead, Amanda, and then Selena.
I gave a training last week on person-centered care, and I had someone from one of the managed care programs come too, and I've given webinar trainings before, and they've also been managed care people have also come to those too. Right? So that's excellent.
Yeah, well, I know they're very interested, obviously, in how their systems can be more responsive to both of these programs, but also, more importantly, the individual needs of the beneficiaries.
My question is for CDA, because just thinking about, again, locally, what different communities have in terms of information and assistance lines and consumers that are just calling, just starting fresh, looking for community resources. So what method would be used from CDA to AAA to kind of make sure that information assistance, that people have access to knowing how to direct people in the community to programs and services that promote independence.
Good point. Yeah, so there's...
Was that a question or was it a comment?
Both. Both, but I mean, I don't know what thought process has gone into that, but I just know at our local level, we're really looking at, how information and assistance right now is not necessarily meeting the needs of our community, and it's very local. So if we were really being, I would think now as we're approaching this process as a community, that this is a definite important tier of information that needs to get out, and how do you train and educate the people that are on the front line taking these kind of calls.
Yeah, really good point, Selene. Thank you. Okay.
So Lois responded
Okay.
with regards to working with the plans.
Right.
And she said they have been quite enthusiastic in following through with their providers.
Great answer, Lois. We were hoping it would be a positive response.
And then a couple other comments. A comment from Diane Puckett. Perhaps the reviewers could spend some time in an ADHD learning about the model prior to initiating the reviews. And then from Elizabeth Machado, MCP need to get physicians informed as to what services CBAS provides and how that helps participants' whole health plan.
Good, thank you. Okay, let's move on to part 2 in the phases of implementation. We've still got quite a ways to go. We've got about an hour left for this part of our agenda. So section 2 is entitled Assessment of Statutes, Regulations, Policies, and Other Requirements. This could take us the rest of the year. And this is pages 12 through 14. So again, on the left is what's already in the statewide plan, and on the right is the areas that CMS will review. So systematic review process for assessing CBAS laws, regulations, and policies against the standards for home and community-based services. And remember, again, this is an excerpt. This is not the full written rule. And these bullets reflect the issues that we've been talking about today: integration, options, right of privacy and freedom from coercion, individual initiative, autonomy and independence, individual scheduling, and physical accessibility. So we would suggest that this section focused on CBAS include a description of the statutes, regulations, and policies that ensure CBAS complies with the home and community-based settings rule. And this is where the requirements that are met, partially met, not met, would be listed. And then a plan for assessing the CBAS laws, regulations, and policies in the future, identifying what needs to change. Now again, this could be a very involved conversation today.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to approach this is we're not going to rewrite all the statutes.
Oh, thank God.
In case anyone was worried. We're really brainstorming. And remember, the process of brainstorming is kind of a quick listing. So let's look at the 3 questions that we have here, and then we'll go back through them one by one. What changes to the CBAS laws and regulations do we know of at this point that may be needed to comply with the home and community-based standards? That's really the most important. 2, how should stakeholders be involved in the process of assessing the laws and regulations? And 3, what areas for policy change or clarification could be addressed through provider bulletins? So kind of 3 different takes on this issue, and you may have some other ways we should approach this issue of assessing the statutes, rules, regulations, and laws. So let's go back to question 1. What changes do we know of right now that may need to comply, may need to be made to comply with the home and community-based standards to better support them? And again, we're brainstorming. We're not going to debate whether one idea is better than another at this point. So any thoughts on this one? Who wants to start? Oh, Amanda.
Sorry.
Great. No. Great.
I can get, generally, I think person-centered planning needs to be defined, and then kind of even tightening, a real simple one that I can, as example would be including the participant as a member of the interdisciplinary team.
Good.
And that's just pulling it down even further.
No, that's great. Great start. Thank you. Other thoughts about other changes that need to be made to better comply?
Okay, I'll be a one-theme person on this today, but Back to the Future, recombining licensing and certification in one house with the ability to grant more flexibility to comply better with the HCBS standards.
Good. Thank you, Lydia. Very
That's
important.
my-
Big ticket.
My theme before I retire. That licensing
Well,
and certification.
luckily, we won't let you retire too soon because we know this is a big job. Other thoughts? Faye, do you have anything you want to add here?
I
Colleen?
No, I this was the first thing that came to my mind, but I'd like to come.
Well, so I think this issue of how do you, it came up earlier, how do you embed the concept of flexibility into the law or the regulations? Because that's really a big essence of the HCB settings requirements, is flexibility. How do you make that parallel? Yes, and we have some folks on the phone.
So there is a mind meld happening over the web. So a comment from Diane Puckett. If we looked at what ensures that rights are humane at the highest level, Lydia's point about being able to request flexibility is a core means to do so.
Good. Thanks, Diane. Anybody else on the line have anything they want to add here? You know, I was thinking, Denise, that when we were doing the last stakeholder process on the STCs, I think we had a long list of policy changes that we might want to just go look at our notes. Because I remember we had a whole section on policy, I thought. I could be wrong. Others could remind me. That might be useful to just have a quick look at.
And that reminds me because, you know, as I stated this in terms of laws, regulations, policies, I should have called out more specifically the waiver requirements because we need to review those as well. And I think that there are some really good nuggets that are now embedded under, for those of us who know it, STC 98, which is that's the special determined condition that addresses the plan's role in working with the providers to coordinate services and various other things. So I think there might be some things that we need to look at there that that might already be sort of set in policy in a general way that might be clarified more specifically through providable all center letters that address some of the issues around coordination and choice and informing the participants, et cetera. So we can look back at those to review.
Good. So let's look at question number 2, and we can always come back and keep filling in question 1. Question 2 raises the idea of how stakeholders could be involved in the process of assessing laws and policies and regulations for needed changes. And again, this isn't something that would necessarily happen before the plan is submitted, but this is something that would be addressed by the plan and happen later on. Anybody have any thoughts about how stakeholders might be involved in this effort?
Well, I will, Bobby, I will donate my 3 file drawers full of regulatory changes that I've collected over 30 years that includes stakeholder input. And maybe that would
be a great kickoff.
One would be there. Yes, I will donate them to whoever.
That's good. Well, maybe we could get an intern who could catalog them.
There we go.
For some kind of stakeholder process.
There we go.
Any other thoughts about how stakeholders could be involved beyond Lydia's file cabinet? In addition to Lydia's file cabinet.
Pre-computers.
Exactly.
I guess, Bonnie, I would just add that I think that the expectation would be at the very least that once we complete an assessment internally with the state, I think that the statewide plan, there's a process where the assessments of each of the program laws and regulations policies are being shared with any of the stakeholders for comments. So at the very least, we'll have that as part of the process to look at what we've done as far as assessment goes. But if anybody wants to give us more help in that, of course, I don't think we refuse.
You know, another piece here I just thought of is when I talked about the programs have so many masters, we've also got Veterans Administration has their own rules and regs. The Adult Daycare Food Program has its own rules and regs. Help me, Amanda. Regional centers have their own rules and regs.
Environmental health.
The fire department. Local public health, the fire department. I mean, it goes on and on. So I'm not advocating we analyze all those rules and regs, but there might be some that really do, and you guys would have to call this out, you guys, the provider community, are there things that you run into relative to those other entities where it's bumping up against the HCBS spirit or intent or actual language? That would be good to hear about someday.
Good. No, I think that's a good reminder of all the other, because
we have the rules we have to follow from
groups.
There's federal, state, and local, and there are within, Department of Healthcare, but there's also outside of Department of Healthcare. So there's a lot of competing regulations that overlap, and it would be really great, like we have the uniform assessment tool. We might have a uniform oversight tool. Just a suggestion.
And who do you represent?
I'm Ed Long's sister.
Debbie Toad, right?
Yeah.
With Rehabilitation Services of Northern California.
Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome. Sorry, I was tardy.
Okay, that's great. Well, we can certainly come back to this as people think of other policy changes that need to be made. I'm just wondering, this last question addresses how the provider bulletin could be used to educate providers or clarify policy issues. Anything anybody wants to add in terms of question number 3? It's obviously a good
Yeah,
tool.
I guess I'd just say that since I threw that out there, that Provider Bulletin Authority isn't one that's really popular, especially with providers, because it's a policy setting mechanism that's outside of the legislative process, but that it is a tool that's in our toolkit. So to the extent we can use it for things that might be administrative fixes on a speedier order, things like the flexibility that we're talking about, it might be a mechanism for doing that. So just a thought.
No, I think it's a good suggestion. Okay, so how about if we go on to section 3, which starts on, we have one comment from the telephone, and then we'll go on to section 3 on page 15.
So it's a comment from Diane Puckett regarding the 4-hour requirements. She states that it's very institutional. Looking at this requirement could be an example of how they ensure that they're utilizing the service while gaining flexibility. And then a comment from Daisy Absalon with regards to question number 1, a face-to-face process by managed care plan is a suggestion. And
What about it?
So let's see, for question number 1, face-to-face process by a managed care plan.
Probably related to assessments. So
If you go back to question number 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe she's saying that needs to change. Oh, okay. I see.
Or what we need to do to
Yeah.
That's
okay.
a good point
Okay,
she's
good.
making,
Okay.
because sometimes it's still taking way too long.
Okay, thank you, Diane and Daisy. It's good to know you're still with us, and I hope others are too. Okay, let's go to page 15, 16, 17. This is section 3 of the phases of implementation, which is called Compliance Determination Process for Home and Community-Based Settings, and it goes all the way through page 20 on the tool. So again, on the left is what's currently in the state plan. On the right, what CMS will be reviewing the plan to assess in this area of compliance. And then what we're suggesting down below that this section should include from the CBAS perspective. So if we could lift that up just a little bit, what the section should include a description of CBAS oversight and monitoring as reflected in the law, regulations and policies, the requirement that centers reapply and undergo on-site surveys every 2 years, an identification of the number of centers statewide and the fact that half of all centers receive an on-site survey every year. So that's what the thinking is currently that should be reflected in the CBAS component of this. And here are 3 questions that we thought might be useful to talk about here today. Question 1, should CBAS provider self-assessments be completed by all centers? If yes, should they be completed all at once or at the time of certification, renewal, or both? Question, we'll come back to answer these just so you can have a preview. Question 2, how should stakeholders be engaged in the development and implementation of assessment tools for participants, providers, in the state? In section 3, question 3, how should the following be considered and addressed in the plan with regards to compliance? CBAS centers that serve disability-specific or disease-specific populations. CBAS centers that serve predominantly or exclusively one ethnic group or community of color. And the next section, CBAS centers that use delayed egress devices or otherwise have secured perimeters. So again, these are important issues, and the question we'll come back to is how should they be addressed in the plan with regards to compliance? So let's start with question number 1 here. Should provider self-assessments be completed by all centers? If yes, should they be completed all at once at the time of renewal? What's your thinking about that?
Can we do a context setter?
Sure, please.
So if we take a look at some of the things that CMS told us in their review tool that they're going to be looking for here, they want us to tell them with the CBAS centers what level of compliance do we have with these requirements. So we have sort of the general umbrella question, which is how does CBAS in general meet the requirements for HCB? And we do that through the assessment of the laws and regulations. Then we take the CBAS programs themselves and take a look at them and say, how are they complying with these requirements? So they're going to be looking to see, well, how do we determine that? Do we determine it through, we go out for an assessment that the providers complete, and then we do some kind of validation test, et cetera. So they're going to be looking at how we figure this out, this range of compliance among our CBAS centers. So I just want to point out that this center kind of overlaps with the discussion about ongoing monitoring that we'll talk about at the end of the plan, which is why we had put in here that for us to describe in this section of the plan what the laws and regs say about ongoing monitoring for the plans and how we can, think about, for the providers, and how we can think about rolling up into our existing processes as much of these assessment of the HCB rules as we possibly can. So that's just sort of the backdrop for these questions.
Great. Thank you, Denise. That's always helpful. Okay, so question 1. What kind of feedback can we have on should CBAS provider self-assessments be completed by all the centers, and should they be done all at once or at the time of renewal or some other approach? Debbie, you want to start?
Well, I wanted to get a greater, I'm sorry I was tardy, so I may have missed some of the background on this, but a self-assessment would include what?
So I'll take that as a start. So part of what's been happening over on the statewide transition plan side is that they have been working on developing a sort of core set of questions in a tool, actually in several tools, one to be completed by the providers to assess their compliance at their center, one to be completed by beneficiaries, and one to be a validation tool that state reviewers will use at on-site. So they've been working on these sort of core questions that, no surprise, they go back exactly to the HCB rules and ask questions about those rules. So, from my perspective, what I've seen so far in this effort is that we're trying to hone in on something that's specific enough so it's understandable to centers when they say, when you look at it and you say, yes, we meet this, what is the standard, what are the indicators of meeting it, and if you meet 4 out of 5, those kinds of things are questions that we're still grappling with. But that's basically what it's about, for the provider to make a determination about their facility.
So I would say that it's hard to answer this in the absence of a tool, and I'll tell you why. Oftentimes what can happen is it does us no good to do a self-assessment if the tool is not applicable to what we're doing. And I'll give you a concrete example of that. Department of Public Health back in the day, when they used to come to our center 12 years ago or whatever it was, had a tool for evaluating a skilled nursing facility, not an adult day health care center, and that's what they walked through our program with. So it's hard for me to say, in the absence of looking at the tool that you're talking about, whether or not I think it would be beneficial for us to do it on any more than an absolute minimum mandatory level. And I say that not to be a jerk, but just that's the reality, because we are already spread incredibly thin with a really poor reimbursement rate, which doesn't even cover the cost of our services. So you're asking us to do additional work, and I would say that if that additional work helped us in the way that it gave us the opportunity to reflect on what we're doing, step back from it, analyze it, and inform us moving forward, and it's beneficial to our participants, then I would say absolutely that's something that we could do on a regular basis and should do. Is that a fair no?
That's a totally fair comment. Thank you. I think it's completely realistic. Anyone else have anything they want to add here?
Can I just one more time? I think that to some extent, again, we're kind of looking at what's happening on the statewide plan side, and sort of seeing what they're doing and how we intersect with them. So I guess, from my perspective, I would say I don't think it's beneficial to do a wholesale look. We may end up doing that because we're going to be consistent and do the same processes across all state programs. But in thinking about this myself, I think that what I would like to be able to do is to get you what you just said, which is a tool that will help you look at something CDAS specific, look at whether, a way of measuring and looking at this on your own for education purposes, so that when we come out to review you and hold you to the standards, that you have a sense of what those standards look like.
Well, something we could use it as our own internal quality assurance.
Right.
For example,
That's
we do
right.
a utilization review, right? And our utilization review that we do at Mount Diablo Center may be different than the utilization review that they do at NAP. It almost certainly is, which is different from what they do at YOLO, which is different than what they do at Peg Taylor. So we all do something different now. If there was something that we could agree upon was a helpful tool for utilization review, we would. Same thought process, right?
No. Good point. Okay, well, let's keep going, and we can always come back to these questions. How should stakeholders be engaged in the development and implementation of the assessment tools? And we already heard when Jalal talked that certainly there's a group of advocacy organizations that are going to be involved in the creation of the beneficiary tool. Are there other ways that stakeholders could be involved in the assessment tools for both beneficiaries, providers, and the state? Any thoughts about that? Okay?
It's tricky with the timeline, because if the beneficiary tool is created first and that can be used, if you can take the feedback from the beneficiaries on that tool to inform any sort of provider or on-site assessment tool, that might make more sense, so sort of what beneficiaries are looking for. But I'm unclear if they have to sort of move on track at the same time, or if the beneficiary tool will go first.
Yeah, that's a good point. It would be great to be able to use the beneficiaries to inform what the other assessment tools are. But you're right, until there's a specific timeline and sequence of events, it'll be hard to know that.
I can't spell. That's okay.
It's okay. It's like writing on a flip chart. It's impossible to spell correctly. It's spelled wrong. Any other thoughts about how stakeholders could be engaged in the development of the tools?
The only other thought that I have, and it sounds like they're doing this with the general assessment tool, but I wasn't quite clear, is to release a template for comment before finalizing it. And then, you can put that out to your general network and groups that the consumers work with to help inform changes to whatever template.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Jalal did say that they were going to put the draft. Hard to know what would be included in the draft out for comment.
And I think earlier somebody said test it and make sure that it's not going to be a 5-day exercise. Test it on in the real world.
Yeah, beta test.
Beta test. There you go.
Yeah, you need to know that people understand what you're asking.
Right.
That they're interpreting.
And that you're getting, and we have to think too about, well, how are the results going to be aggregated? Is it going to be an online tool? Is it a paper tool? Somebody has to data enter. I mean, I'm seeing dollar signs, like Debbie said, all through the system on this. Nobody
has the staffing to do what perhaps we would do in an ideal world. So,
Right. So what kind of resources are going to be
yeah,
needed?
very resource intensive.
Good. Those are great points. So let's go on to question 3, which focuses on how should these 3 subtopics be addressed with regards to compliance in the plan. So remember, we're talking about writing a plan, not doing all the activities yet. So how should compliance for CVAS centers that serve disability-specific or disease-specific populations, is there anything that should be considered or addressed in the plan as it relates to that item? And then we'll go on to the others.
Do we know what CMS's position is on this?
You know, I don't know that we do. I put this note in here because as I was combing through, again, their review tools, things that I came across and their FAQs, that that certain things are not allowable, like you're allowed to provide services in a hospital setting. You know, there's certain things they're specific about, but then they come back and then they say, unless you can demonstrate that they meet the qualities of a HCB setting and that they still promote choice of setting and services and access to the great community, et cetera, et cetera. So in thinking about, for example, I had a conversation with Marie Dunn yesterday, West Peninsula. Well, they're not on the hospital grounds, but we have one center that's on a hospital ground, but it's on a campus. It's not in the hospital. So thinking about, well, how will we talk about this? How will we review this and evaluate it? Well, from what I can gather from the CMS tools, it's in the context of, do they still have HCB characteristics? Do they promote choice? Do they promote independence? All of those things. So I guess that's why I included that note, so we weren't all just taking this question cold. But I guess it seems to me that we will be saying, yes, we have centers that do this, and then the evaluation becomes, but do they still have the characteristics of a non-institutional setting? And those would be excellent. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. For example, within the context of our. It's an important question within the context of our discussions about managed care and flexibility in our stakeholder discussions last year about developing flexible models to serve particular populations. That may impact regulatory requirements having to do with staffing, for example, if you were specializing in serving particular groups. And also within the context of a very diverse California, where people from particular racial, ethnic groups may want to choose to be at a CVAS setting, but they may want to be with a population they feel comfortable with. So that needs to be considered also within the context of what Denise is saying, which is, does the setting still meet the intent of the pool?
And that's back to my original concern, thinking about a case we had where somebody really, by choice, wanted our center when we felt that there was a better choice for them, and it caused all kinds of havoc because we weren't really set up to care appropriately for this individual in our program. From a staffing standpoint, we just weren't set up to do it.
Right.
So consumer side of it, choice is what we actually have developed locally and what we've invested in as a center.
So there's that interesting line about choice, is if you're too prescriptive about how you interpret the rule, you can be in a situation where you're limiting choice for particular subpopulations.
And you're creating an environment that's not conducive to their maintenance, their improvement, their happiness, their all these different levels. Right. So I can tell you for sure that we found it interesting. We have clients from the regional center in our general program that fit in totally beautifully. And then we had situations where we had, for example, a client with Down syndrome who now is aged into Alzheimer's disease. And the interventions that were used with them in the regional center environment were much more interventions that you would use in a child care setting than you would use in an adult day health care setting. And so the regional center staff was coming in and training our staff on how to do these interventions that were very something totally counter to how we treat adults in our environment. So I mean, there are a lot of little minefields to walk around, and we definitely need to make sure that at the core is the person and not some arbitrary rule. Not saying it's arbitrary, but it's arbitrary. Like intentionally, right? Unintentionally arbitrary. What's
Arbitrary.
Yeah.
Well, is there, so I'm assuming, and I need your help on this, Lydia, at the NODSTA last year, when they had the Najwa come in and talk with us, and there was the whole issue of choice, you know, and then on the other hand, you had the issue of not allowed on a hospital ground, or it seemed like they were removing choice. And I'm just thinking, is there any way that we could write into this, you know, because that's such they're two completely different concepts. So is there any way that we could write into this how we are, you know, we actually need to provide choice to these centers that do have the delayed egress or do have, you know, the parameters and the things that HCBS doesn't want us to do. But the problem is that if we take those away or we change them at all, we're taking away people's right to choice. Right. And is there any way that we can address? I mean, can we address that?
I think it's a really good idea, and these are really difficult concepts, and these are tough things to reconcile. And I think the more thought that is in the plan, and the fact that, you know, we've had these hard conversations, and this is sort of what's been discussed. I think that level of detail is important to say. At the end of the day, we want to protect the individual's choice, and that's their choice. To be, I mean, I don't want to be too prescriptive in what I'm saying, but I do think that it's valuable to include some of these difficult discussions.
And does it go back to the initial part of the narrative about, you know, what the current access issues are in our environment? Because that is, you know, so different statewide, and setting a context of how we write this plan for us.
Right. I think being very clear about sort of the high levels of acuity of the participants and their high level of need, and really painting a very clear picture of who's participating in the centers.
Yeah, because it seems like the intent is that they want to get states moving away from institutional-like settings, and just because you're on a beautiful hospital campus with, you know, on a corner with 2 streets, and it looks like it doesn't necessarily mean by definition that that's an institutional setting, right? It's how the place is designed, the philosophy and all that. So I think if we can emphasize that we're, you know, there's so much, it's a large state, it's a complex state, there's so much variety of, and so on and so forth, and that centers are also located in settings where they can have access to their population, to decent rent, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, I think we'll just have to, you know, work it where we can describe.
I'm having a hard time coming up with some of the summation of this, but we'll go back.
I'll help you with
But
that.
I did put in there because, and I've heard this going around in the discussions with the statewide plan about there's a hierarchy of these requirements, and you know, or you can look at the requirements in the context of a hierarchy and say, if you put the most important value up the top, what would it be? And choice would be probably, you know, right up there. So the choice trumping those other things is you know, it comes down to it.
And integration in the community, which is really what adult day is and CVAS is designed to do. Keep people integrated in the community.
Well, I think that goes back, I mean, to why, you know, why we put this in here, because there is a sort of sense that these kinds of centers are isolating by definition because they have these specific individuals that are served and are, you know, not restricted to, but are pretty much, that's who they're targeting.
I think I would comment there then, for example, thinking of a dementia-specific program that it actually fosters more choice and independence because it's a specialized setting with very specialized trained staff who can work with individuals for a much longer period of time in their disease progression than they would be able to in a setting that didn't have that facility environment and the specialized staff. So I would turn it to argue that it actually facilitates more independence and more integration in the community when we have some of these specialized settings.
Yeah.
An interesting thing to consider again is CBAS. You know, it's just sort of the tip of the iceberg of the person's experience during the course of the day. I remember it was Diane Cooper, I think, used that analogy. So I think what's helpful here is to think about how what happens at the CBAS Center facilitates that integration during the rest of the day for the individual. And so in the instance you're describing, Lydia, that's being able to work with somebody with very specific needs in very specific ways during the, let's say, 12 hours a week where they may be at the center may really support their further integration and continued community building during the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And that's part of the discussion.
I think we can describe that well.
That's good.
Okay. Well, we have a comment from the phone.
So regarding access, in some rural areas there's very little choice. May only be one center in a 50-mile radius, so only choice is whether or not to attend, not choice of centers.
Right.
So that's from April Joyce. And then another comment from Kimberly Eason, or a question actually. When does participant safety override choice?
Yeah. I was trying to think of how to say that. I think that's really, that's the huge point. That's the point you made, Celine, about the patient wanted to, the beneficiary participant wanted to be at your center, but you didn't think your center was the appropriate safe place for them. And how does choice work in that situation?
There was one person that was compromising the safety of the majority of the center participants.
Yeah. Ed?
So the other part of that discussion is negotiation.
Ed, could you speak up?
The other part of that question is where does negotiated risk fall within this?
And I think that comes back to having admission criteria and discharge criteria. I think, that's where when we have a situation like that, and we certainly have had some awesome strippers in our Alzheimer's Daycare Resource Program that would get up and take off their clothes, and I'll tell you that, that might be something enticing in a different setting. In that setting, it set a lot of people off. And so it was not really beneficial to the rest of the participants in the room to be disturbed in that way. So we had to be able to have something in our admissions criteria and discharge criteria that addressed behaviors that impacted the well-being of everybody in the program. So I think that's where we can't take on the risk of saying no to a beneficiary that meets state criteria and take on a risk that they're going to destroy our entire program. And I don't think that we should have to take on that risk as providers. I think that we develop our own admissions and discharge criteria so that we don't get responsible for that risk. That's my 2 cents. I don't know if I'm allowed to have those 2 cents.
Yes, you have. Well, it's kind of reminds me of the vaccine conversation going on right now. It's like balancing an individual choice that, I feel I have the right to make versus the good of the group.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting conversation because when you read the rules, it doesn't really address that issue. No. It really just addresses the beneficiary's choices. Right. And it doesn't take in consideration all of these other issues. And I think, from the advocacy point of view, as well as the provider point of view, as well as the family point of view, there really are different ways to look at the issue of choice. And important to think about these considerations that you've all brought up.
Yeah.
There's rules. Okay. So let's go on in the interest of time. I'm watching the clock. We're moving along well, but we still have quite a bit to do. We have some favorite topics. So the next phase of implementation, which starts on page 21, is person-centered planning, an issue near and dear to the hearts of everyone here. And again, on the left side is what's currently, obviously this probably will change, what's currently in the statewide transition plan. On the right side, what CMS will look for, and what we think the CBAS section should include, which includes an overview of how the Special Terms and Conditions 96 about individual care planning should be addressed, and plans to revise the IPC, which is on our agenda a little bit later in the meeting to form our work group to use the IPC to support person-centered planning. So we have one question for this section, which is here. Given CMS direction to keep person-centered planning details brief, what are the, I know the question's a run-on question.
Bobby?
Yeah.
Can I just set this one up? Because this is the only thing that's listed in the review tool for criteria that they're going to look at this item in the plan, and that is that we don't include any substantial extraneous information in this section of the plan. So they really want the plan to focus on the settings part of the rule and not the preamble to it that's all about person-centered planning. So so that's just one of the items that they are going to be checking off. So given that direction, and also given that we were directed under SDC 96 to do the stakeholder process, to flesh out all these things about person-centered planning, what do we do here is the question. What do we want to include here, and then what other means would we use to, memorialize what we're going to do? Because clearly we're going to do some things around this stuff. Sorry, I felt the need to set that up because I saw that review tool, I about fell off my seat.
Wow. I think, and I don't know if this is helpful, but I think from the CMS perspective, and this is where sort of the reality of what's in the rule is a little bit confusing. I think their thought was when they implemented the rule, technically, whatever it was, March 16th of last year, they felt like the person-centered planning process had to already be in effect. So they've already, the whole person-centered planning philosophy, there wasn't going to be a transition to that. That was something that settings were supposed to already be applying and actively engaging. And so I think that might be why they don't want as much of that in the transition plan, because there's this thought that, well, that's already, these rules are, from day one, that's what everyone should be following. And whether there's been, the formal process to figure out how those rules, that philosophy is implemented, I don't know. But
was that across all settings at the time, or managed care?
I think the thought was residential, non-residential. Yeah. There wasn't a thought of transition to that. That's not what's happening right now.
So why doesn't CMS have a stakeholder process when they come up with this? I'll record that.
Public comment.
Colleen said that.
So based on that, Faye, and Denise, based on what you said, is this a place to address the fact that actually person-centered planning is being talked about, but really hasn't been implemented, certainly through the plans? I mean, everybody says it is, but it's not really happening yet. And where is the place to talk about what it will take to do that? I don't know if this is the right place or not. I don't know if anybody has a sense of that. Faye, I don't know if you do. Or
well, that's why I threw that question out there, because I don't know. I mean, we clearly had a whole meeting about it last time, and we are going to do something. So where do we want to formalize this?
Amanda?
But if they don't want much information, do we want to just take those 4 questions and see what are they really asking for in those 4 questions? Choice, the choice, preferences, and abilities, participating in treatment planning, just kind of without all the detail, but just kind of put in that this is what we're doing today. Yeah, and knowing that we're going to be developing the IPC, and I think that's where all the person-centered planning is going to be detailed. But if they don't want it, we can just say, we're working on this piece, and these are what you've identified, what they've identified to us, and this is what we're doing.
And maybe, I think that's a good point, and maybe under B is the place to talk about because it says where should efforts to improve person-centered
Right.
planning happen, and maybe that's the place to start talking about the link between the centers and managed care and the important role that managed care is playing that, as we've talked about, doesn't exist in most other states, but it exists in every county now in California. And how can care coordinators, the interdisciplinary care team, on and on and on, be embedded with the, not only the philosophy of patient-centered care, but the skills to make it happen. Because the philosophy isn't enough, in my experience. That it really takes skills, a different set of skills to do this kind of work. Yes. Oh, good. We have from the phone.
I have a comment from Diane Puckett with a different perspective.
Good.
I think we need to prove that this is a problem, not assume that it is. We say that we are already doing it because we are. We develop our care plans today based entirely on the person.
Good. That's a really good point, Diane. Thank you. And I guess this is also where to talk about the IPC work group.
Sure.
IPC.
You want to pop out and look at the chart right now and just jump ahead?
Well, let's finish this.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think this is the place, I think, to identify that the care plan work group is going to occur, and maybe what the charter is could go into this section. Okay, so shall we go on? Is that enough?
Yeah.
And I would say, Faye, particularly if the advocates hear anything more about this issue, if you could keep the departments informed, it would be really helpful, because I think this is where, in this whole process of working with CMS, that sometimes different groups hear different information, and they don't always get together and pull the information as they go. It would be really helpful.
Very ad hoc. You could be at a conference and hear one thing. And then
Right, exactly. Yeah, or you go to a meeting with CMS and they say one thing and the state doesn't talk to them for a long time, and so they don't hear anything.
But Bobby, just to wrap up on that, I mean, putting Amanda and Diane's comment together, it just seems to me that, there's just not a clear definition of what person-centered care planning means. And so I think being a little more abstract at this point and identifying what happens today and leaving the door open for the other things that we're working on might be the most productive way, because they don't want a lot of detail. We're not real clear yet, but I have a feeling with more conversations among ourselves, it'll really start to crystallize a little more. So I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like, based on what's written here and what Faye said, that they have an idea. They think everybody does not have the same definition, and has, moved way down the path on this. Maybe unrealistic.
Yeah. I was just saying, because I spent a lot of time with one of my colleagues out this week with the flu. I spent a lot of time doing the research that I would have had her helping me with, and I was looking over the regs really, really closely and all the tools. And there are really specific things about persons that are planning that precede all of the HCB rules and the 441, whatever, 301. So there are some things, but I think that where the conversation we had last meeting on the 17th showed me that we have these gaps in understanding what things are is in the operationalizing. So I found that the conversation last time we had with providers and the plans was centered around all of those things about what does it look like in the center, what are you doing, how are you arranging the furniture, all of those things that have more to do with implementation. And I think that the regs speak to the planning and the choice and the participation in the planning, and but what this thing is ultimately is a little bit silent on that. So,
Yeah, good point. Okay, let's go on. We have two more sections to cover, and just in the interest of time, at 4:45, we're going to stop this part of the discussion so we can talk about the two work groups. and the next steps, because we want to make sure everybody gets out of here on time and that we finish. So the next section is on page 22. It's the appeals section, number 5. There is nothing in the basic element review tool focused on this section, which is interesting. We think the section should include a description of the existing grievance and appeal rights and processes for CBAS participants, both the CBAS regulations and the 1115 waiver special terms and conditions, the existing processes for CBAS providers to appeal deficiency citations, and any additional process that's developed to raise or dispute compliance issues at CBAS centers. So I guess the question that we thought might best be posed to you today is, what would stakeholders like to see develop to enhance, underline enhance, existing grievance and appeal processes, or to specifically address what we talked about earlier, home and community-based settings compliance issues? So this section and the next section, which is on compliance monitoring, kind of overlap with the compliance section, as Denise mentioned earlier. But I think this is a good question. We may get stumped on the next ones on monitoring, but anything that stakeholders would like to see developed to enhance existing grievance and appeal processes. Anybody think of anything that might be appropriate here?
In what setting are you talking about?
Our setting.
So let me try this one. So let's just say that that the participants through their beneficiary assessment say, you know what, my CBAS center is not they're not giving me what I need in the way of freedom to move about the facility and sit at whatever table I want and have my meal preferences on or whatever it is. They have a complaint about that. So what I was trying to outline here is that we do have regulations that address what happens for participant grievances within the center. Participants do have, as managed care members, a grievance process through the managed care plan. So, but is there anything additional that we need to be thinking about saying or developing here so that we make sure that when somebody has an HCB specific kind of issue that we have a mechanism for addressing that? Or we have it covered. We might have it covered. That's a good answer.
I mean, they get it currently when anybody enrolls in the program, they get the participants' rights and they get the process for registering a grievance. I mean, they're aware that these things exist. I haven't had a grievance at my center, so I don't know how effective or not effective our process is in dealing with the grievance, so it's a little hard to comment on that, and I think it's perhaps confusing for beneficiaries that they would have a grievance process through the managed care who approves this program that they get. How many layers of grievance procedures do you have? I think that might be a little bit confusing, and so perhaps just some clarification around the levels of the processes or something.
Well, I think this is Michael from Healthcare Services.
Michael, speak up so everyone can hear on the phone.
This is Michael from Healthcare Services. I think that the issue, what Debbie's bringing up, we have it under the CCI program as well, where there's an existing grievance and appeals process that the beneficiary has the right to, and there's one that they run through the managed care health plan as well. It's basically giving the beneficiary the right to go through different channels. They also still have the fair hearing process as well, which is a third complaint process. So it allows them to not go to the health plan or the managed care health plan if they're grieving against the health plan. They choose a different avenue for the complaint. So I think this is what this is looking at, is still giving the beneficiaries different avenues without feeling that they would be, for lack of a better term, retaliated from their provider, their managed care provider that they're under.
Yeah, I would support what Michael's saying. This, Lydia. I think in California we have a robust grievance and appeals process, and I would like to think in part it's because we have such strong advocates in our state who have really worked hard to be sure that we have those in place. So I think here if we flesh out what Michael was just describing, that we have many avenues for appeal. And the only other area that might be missing, and Denise, maybe you've had some thought or discussion with CMS on this, is there at some point during the transition period, if a setting itself is found to be out of compliance or not somehow cooperating and becoming compliant, what happens then? That's kind of another area my brain went to. Let's just say a simple example would be non-access. It's not compliant for access. And there's, some clarification about what that needs to look like. Then, then what? And I don't have any idea how this process is going to roll out. So,
well, I think
maybe that's a
at least I do. In the next section, I think that some of the presumptions we've made are that because we have 2-year cycles of certification and we have existing processes where we say some provider is deficient in a certain area, there's a plan of correction process, and we'll actually be able to make 2 passes around seeing all the centers over between now and 2019. So there'll be 2 opportunities to do corrective action to gain compliance. So, I mean, I think I guess that's what I kind of think is a sufficient process.
Yeah, so we're going to describe it in great detail, and they'll be very impressed. I mean, unless you guys, as the experts in this, come up with something, yeah.
Okay, so the last section is the compliance monitoring. So again, the compliance section, which was section 3, and this section are duplicative in some ways, because this is the monitoring of that section, and we talked a lot about monitoring then. Denise, maybe in the interest of time, it would be good to focus us on which of the questions would be most helpful to answer that we haven't talked about yet. Do you have a sense of that, of the 4 questions?
I guess, I know, especially in this room, there are many opinions about the state monitoring processes. And so, I guess, whatever feedback we could get about how we can, in our usual monitoring roles, look at these issues now in addition to what we're already doing, and do it in a way that's going to be, clear to the providers about what to expect, that it's helpful to them, that we advance the intent of the rule and all that stuff. So what might we do? It's kind of in number 1. How do our current processes support it? Or actually it's in number 2. What might we do to strengthen those processes?
So maybe we could focus on the strengthening question, number 2, for the time that we have left. And I mean, from certainly the providers, an important question, which you are all involved in, is there a way to strengthen or improve the monitoring process?
That exists currently?
Yeah.
Or
yes.
New?
For looking at this.
Yeah, I think that's these issues. You don't know what the new is going to be, as you said earlier. So I guess given what exists today, is as much as we know.
We don't even know what the tools are. I have a little trouble navigating that other than to say I think it's a really good idea to beta test stuff. So as we come out with it, if we're not in a position where we can say we're just going to test it with these 5 sites, at least we come out with it, we apply it to everybody, and then we circle back with 5 sites and say, what was your experience, blah, 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 blah. Because I get that sometimes you have CMS regulations that say start today. But what is our process for checking whether or not it's effective? Even if we do have to start today, I think you do designate sites that you're going to go back and check in with. And I think that you do that in a thoughtful way. You don't just pick perfect providers like me. I think what you do is you look at the different things that we were talking about today. So you look at programs that specifically focus on the developmentally disabled population. You look at a program that focuses on the Alzheimer's population. You look at a program that integrates different, so that you look at a rural program, you look at an urban program. So you get a nice mix and see what different benefits, outcomes, barriers, things that you're running into in those 5 sites or 6 sites or 10 sites or whatever it is. I mean, the smaller we exist as an industry, the fewer sites I guess you need to have. But
Good point. Any other thoughts about this question?
Well, and I think you can try and coordinate it or learn from what happened with the initial sort of on-site assessment that DHCS will be doing. So you don't duplicate, you don't have all these multiple trips and multiple assessments, and try and keep it coordinated. And then if DHCS or throughout the larger process highlights certain particular problem areas, you focus on that so you're not assessing people who don't need to be assessed as much.
Good. Anything else? Anything from on the phone?
I have a quick question, maybe a quick question. What is the language that they use? It isn't remedial. Oh, heightened scrutiny. Can you describe? I mean, is there something?
We've been talking to the Department of Homeland Security.
I think that's
It's not here in this language.
Lordy, lordy. So are they going to expect something from you with a modified or different process for the heightened scrutiny?
Yeah, so the way and this is not my expertise at all across all these provider types, but the way I understand it is that there are certain provider types that are identified as being heightened scrutiny. So I think what we're going to be
sort of de facto?
Yeah, so we're going to be dealing with it pretty straightforward. We've got CVAP, 240 CVAP centers, and they comply to varying levels. Some of them are going to need to be tweaking things and doing things to improve compliance. And we're going to be in this plan be asked to detail what are the compliance levels. So in part, I think that's what the initial self-assessment of providers was intended to do, is to get that sort of inventory, because clearly we're going to look at a rollout over a 2-year period where we do our certification renewal and catch up with all of the centers in that period of time. So so heightened scrutiny. Short story is that it probably is not going to apply in this sense. But we will have providers who are out of compliance with some things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Good.
Okay. Well, let's just see any last thoughts about the outline. So we have someone on the phone who has a comment.
There's a question about this section. Is the universal assessment tool included in this area?
Ed, would you like to answer that?
And what was the question?
The question is, from Daisy Absalon, is the universal assessment tool included in this area?
Can you?
No.
I'm sorry, I stepped
Yeah, that's
out.
okay.
So
It's snickering from the audience, I think, just because the universal assessment will be probably longer in its implementation than our plans together for HCB. But no, this is about the ongoing monitoring that will happen in the CVAP center, and the assessments that are mentioned in this section are the assessments that we presume will be part of this process, which are provider self-assessments for the HCB rule, the beneficiary assessments about the HCB rule, and then the state's assessment tools for validating all of them.
So are they going to enlist the caregiver to provide the participant assessment where we have severe cognitive impairment?
So they would be us, and us in coordination with DHCS and what they're doing on the statewide plan side. And this is what they're going to be bringing out to the advocates and stakeholders to give us some feedback on. So that hasn't started yet. That is, to my knowledge, the beneficiary tool. But yeah, these are all the nuances. In fact, I think Jalal talked about that from James' presentation. Yeah, the challenges with creating this tool as a campus.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the outline of the plan?
Thank you for all your help.
Yeah, great feedback. Denise, thanks for recording all the notes. And of course, the next step will be to write the plan, taking into consideration all of this input that we've received, not just today as we've gone through this, but at the previous 2 meetings. So let's just talk for a minute about the 2 work groups. So at our last meeting, we talked about forming 2 work groups, the IPC revision work group and the quality work group. And both of these are discussions that started in the last CBAS stakeholder process around the STCs and the waiver changes. And two things have happened now. We have two draft charters for both of these work groups, and a group of volunteers who would like to serve on the two work groups, and we're looking for additional volunteers. So maybe we could pull up the charts. So this is the IPC work group charter draft, and here everyone can see the purpose and the people that have volunteered so far. Stuff right there. Thank you. So I think what we'd like, we're not going to review the charter in any detail. That'll be done at the first meeting of this group. But what you can see is the purpose of the CBAS IPC is to identify revisions in the IPC that support person-centered planning, bring the IPC up to date with program requirements, facilitate information exchange, increase capacity for documenting, tracking, and measuring data, quality indicators, and outcomes, and improve the design, functionality, and use of the IPC form. And these wonderful individuals have volunteered so far to serve on the IPC work group. What I'd like to suggest is that anybody that's on the phone or here in the room, if anyone on the phone who would like to volunteer for this work group, if you could just send us your name. We're not going to read them out loud. You just send your name in right now, or you can send in your name later to the CBAS stakeholder process email, which we'll look at in a second. And if anybody here in the room is interested, if after the meeting you could just let us know, we would entertain any volunteers. And these groups will start meeting soon. So this is the IPC work group, IPC revision work group. I think the revision part is very important. And let's look at the charter for the quality work group, just to give everyone an overview. Thank you. So the purpose of this is to develop a quality assurance and improvement strategy that includes metrics for tracking and improving participant outcomes. And these are the individuals who have volunteered so far to serve on the quality work group. Again, if you're on the phone and would like to volunteer to be on this group, you could just send your name in right now, or you can go to the CBAS website and send your name in later. And if there's anyone here in the room that would like to volunteer for the quality work group, if you could let us know before you leave today, I think that would be really helpful. Again, these are two work groups that were identified last year in the STC CBAS stakeholder process, and that we're now ready, the department's now ready to get started working with them. Denise?
Can we scroll down to the bottom of the document there? And I just want to, underneath all the background, there's a well, anticipated meeting schedule where we just, again, we're sort of trying to figure out how everything gets started, but that we would anticipate having monthly meetings and a conference call. So again, so people can participate remotely. They don't have to spend money getting on planes and participating, so we don't want that to be a barrier. And then we anticipate that we'll begin in June. And I think that, at least internally, we think it's a good idea that we start the discussion with both work groups at the same time, because there's a big overlap, with these issues. So, so that's just something that we just threw out as initial thinking on this process. So if anybody has any other thoughts, we'd love to hear them, and definitely want to see some additional things added to the list.
So again, the idea is that these would begin sometime in June, not immediately. They'd be telephonic. The first meeting, the two work groups would meet together to sort out scope issues. And then they'd probably meet for a year or so. Okay, so if you're interested in volunteering for the IPC revision work group and or the quality work group, if you're on the phone, you can just send your name in now, and we'll get you on the list. If you're here in the room, just let one of the CDA staff know before you leave, and we'll follow up with everyone and confirm their names later. Okay, so now it's time for public comment. And if you are interested in making public comment, if you're on the telephone, you can type in your question or you can raise your electronic hand, and we will open the phone for you. When you make your comment, if you could state your name and your organization and keep your comments to 1 minute, it would be helpful so that we can hear all of the comments and finish the meeting as scheduled. So let's just stop now and see if anyone who is on the phone wants to raise their hand for public comment or type in a comment. And while the people on the phone are doing that, let's see if anyone here in the room has any additional comments to make that they haven't made during the course of the meeting today. This would be the time to do that. Anyone here in the room have public comment?
I would just say I'm really grateful for this process. I honestly, this is not to kiss CDA in places not mentioned out loud, but I truly appreciate the incorporation, not just that they recognize that a stakeholder process is not just giving you a piece of paper and you write down comments and it goes back and then there's no transparency in how it's implemented. I like that we sit in a room, we offer the ability to participate by phone, we give out materials so that everybody's looking at the same thing, we have a robust conversation around it, we have an opportunity for input afterwards, and then we see how the process unfolds, and I truly appreciate that.
Thank you, Debbie. Any comments on the phone? Public comment? No public comment on the phone. Okay, so let's just move on to the end of the meeting. And just a reminder of what the next steps are. I think the first and most important next step is any written feedback. Anything that came up today that you want to make sure that we hear, that you didn't think about, you didn't feel comfortable saying, this is the place to send your feedback into. This email address, cbascda@aging.ca.gov. This is also where you can send in your name if you want to be on one of the work groups after the webinar and the meeting is over. So we really want to hear your feedback, and remember, all of the stakeholder feedback in this process is logged and considered and then posted on the website so that everybody can see the feedback. The next steps in the development of the plan, the draft plan, CDA and DHCS will be drafting the CBAS section of the transition plan. It will take into consideration all of the feedback we've heard at meetings 1, 2, and 3. That's today. The draft plan will be released at our next meeting, May 19th. That will open up the public comment period, the 30-day comment period. So that will be May 19th from 2 to 5 p.m. Any other next steps, Denise?
Yeah, I just want to mention something I said earlier when I was talking about the flyer and fact sheet, that we are going to ask for help from our providers again and send out public notices, things that we want you to post, and to the extent possible make understandable to your participants and families and caregivers, so if they want to weigh in and participate and comment on the plan, that they know what this is about and they're welcome to do it.
Great. Okay, so big thank you to the almost 100 people who participated in the meeting today. We had about 83 or 5 people on the phone. We had another 5 or 6 stakeholders here in the room. A huge thank you to the staff here at CDA for organizing and supporting us during the meeting. They're always awesome, all of them. Couldn't do this without. And to CDA and DHCS for, as was said earlier, organizing this process, preparing the materials in a very thoughtful way, and listening carefully to the feedback. So again, stay tuned. Make sure to mark your calendars for the next meeting and the release of the draft plan. And then make sure to leave some time between May 19th and June 19th to read the draft plan and prepare your written comments and submit them so that they can be considered for inclusion in the next version of the plan, which will be shared at our July meeting. Anything else?
Thank you, everybody.
Bobby, thank you for facilitating, and hats off to the staff too. These have been really interesting meetings.
Yes.
Very productive.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, the meeting's adjourned.
Adjourned.
Thank you.